May I join in congratulating the honourable gentleman, the member for East Antrim, in getting this important debate, because this is why Parliament exists. We are here to seek redress of grievance from an overmighty executive which abuses its power. And this is an absolutely classic example of the state abusing its power through aggressive tax collection. Why is it that in the Bible the tax collector is seen as the villain in almost every occasion that the tax collector is referred to? Because the tax collector seeks to extract more than is by law allowed. And in our system, it has always been the case that the job of the tax collector is to raise the tax set out by Parliament, not a penny more nor a penny less. Not a penny more. It is not for the tax collector to squeeze out extra from people if that was what intended. And we know from the discussion that we have had today that HMRC itself did not think there was anything wrong with these schemes early on. And why do we know that? Well, as the honourable gentleman from East Antrim pointed out, they employed people using these schemes. So either we're saying HMRC is so incompetent that it has no idea on the basis on which it is employing people, or that actually, because it saved some money, it thought these schemes were licit. And the other thing we know is that constituents of ours sent in tax returns acknowledging that they were using these schemes, and HMRC did not question them. And then, in a panic, worried about the tax receipts that were coming in. 2010 is an important date when tax receipts were very low. When the country had an enormous deficit, a squeeze gets put on, and a squeeze gets put on that becomes retrospective. But retrospective legislation is something that is basically unconstitutional, except in extraordinary circumstances. Whenever there is any retrospective part of legislation, it has to be specifically approved and cleared by the Attorney General before it can be brought before this House. Why is that? As a safeguard of a constitutional right that people know the basis of the law under which they are operating. And this is surely proper. Because when you have retrospective legislation, people who have behaved properly, have behaved honestly, have followed the law that Parliament had passed, suddenly find that they didn't. But that is entirely unfair and unreasonable and could criminalise any of us for actions we committed years ago. I give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Would he agree with me that the presumption of innocence until proven guilty in all of these scandals are turned on their head, where it's presumption of guilt and unable to prove oneself innocent? And to use a Bible analogy, this isn't so much David versus Goliath, it's David versus an army of Goliaths, and David has the slingshot taken away from him.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. And the extraordinary powers of HMRC, that HMRC, the amalgamation of the Inland Revenue and Customs and Excise historically maintained extraordinary prerogative powers, much greater actually than those of the Inland Revenue. And you have seen the coming together of those two bodies bringing a more aggressive culture to our tax system, which assumes that taxpayers, following the law as they understand it, and indeed as HMRC understood it, may be doing something wrong. And that is a bad principle under which to operate. And we need to be looking after, as members are, the interests of constituents who are being affected in this way. We need to allow people to know that their tax affairs are cleared after an inquiry hasn't been opened. Now, that's set out. There is a 12-month period in which tax returns remain open. There's a 7-year period under which people have to keep records. And yet we've passed retrospective legislation that overturns all of that. And my honourable friend, my right honourable friend, the member for New Forest West, is absolutely right to say that those of us who were here in 2017 should be appalled that this was able to get through without being noticed, without being stopped. And we should look so carefully And I thought what he said to the minister was absolutely right. We should look very carefully at the ministerial responses, because HMRC does have this odd situation of being a non-ministerial department. It is not properly accountable. With most departments, the minister says go, and at least theoretically they goeth. With HMRC, their independence is such that they can effectively ignore ministerial control. But that should work two ways. If the minister cannot control HMRC, he should not read out the rubbish they provide for him to read out from the dispatch box. And he should be very well aware of the warnings that have been given of ministers who have been willing to read out things that then in future turn out either to be untrue or not to have asked the right questions. And I'm also very much looking forward to the Shadow Minister's speech, because the Shadow Minister has the advantage of independence and not having gone native by virtue of being in the Treasury, and bringing, I hope, an independent mind to this, bearing in mind there will be an election this year, and who knows what may happen in that and what responsibilities may fall upon his shoulders, and that it would be really important to know that the opposition is going to be on the side of proper constitutional practice. The whole point of our system is that we come here, and we have done since the 13th century, to seek redress of grievance for our constituents when they are badly treated. This is a classic example. And governments are appalling at answering it, absolutely appalling. People have mentioned the post office, but it's not just the post office. It's Hillsborough, it's infected blood. For some strange reason, governments have a desire to defend the mistakes of long since past administrations, and they do that to the disadvantage of constituents today. I hope on this occasion it will not happen, or at least will not continue to happen. There is an ability to set it right, and there is an ability for this House to do more, because if HMRC isn't producing documents, there are things up our sleeves. The Backbench Business Committee can allow humble addresses to be put forward. There are things this House can do to continue to exert pressure, but it would be so much better if the Minister of the Dispatch Box, who is one of the most able and intelligent ministers in this current administration, were to grasp this, deal with it, and save our constituents from further pain, and frankly, put HMRC in its box.